Welcome to another event with Neighbors on Call. I'm Susan Blunt, one of the directors, and Becca Zirkin, our other director, is here too. Note the Zoom control buttons at the bottom of your screen. I think everybody's familiar with those by now. During our program, we ask you to turn off your video to make streaming easier for everyone. So if you all could do that, please, that'd be great. Now, we will have an after party tonight after the program when we can turn everybody's videos and mics back on so that we can visit again informally. We hope you'll stay online for that if you'd like. Thank you so much for being here with us. Many of you are relatively new to NOC. We are so glad that you've come tonight. Neighbors on Call is an all-volunteer organization. Our primary goal is to elect Democrats to the North Carolina General Assembly. Incredible power rests with the NCGA, and to achieve a more just state, we need more senators and representatives in the state legislature who believe in combating structural racism, health disparities, poverty, and other inequities through sound policy. In 2018, we knocked on over 15,000 doors to help break the supermajority in the NCGA. And in 2020, we knocked, and then COVID came along and we pivoted to dialing in a valiant effort to flip the Senate, the State House. We are so proud that we helped Ricky Hurtado flip his seat from Alamance County. Now, NOC is registered as a PAC, a political action committee, with the state of North Carolina. That means that we can coordinate with the Democratic Party. We're not a fundraising group, but we are a volunteer raising group. And we all need to be ready to put our shoulders to the wheel for 2022. For now, gearing up for 2022 means sticking together and growing our numbers so we are ready for action, understanding how North Carolina electoral politics works, and preparing to apply our energy in the most effective ways to elect Democrats to the North Carolina General Assembly. Becca?
Hi, everybody. I'm Becca. Thank you for being here. Tonight, we are very honored to be joined by two distinguished guests from the North Carolina Senate. Senator Valerie Foushee, representing District 23 in Orange and Chatham counties, and Senator Natalie Murdock, representing District 20 in Durham. Senator Foushee is a lifelong resident of Orange County and a graduate of UNC, and she served the community in many, many roles. She retired from the Chapel Hill Police Department after 21 years of service. She served on the Board of Education for the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools, including as chair, and then was elected to the All-State School Board. And in 2004, she became the first African-American woman elected to the Orange County Board of Commissioners, and she served as chair from 2008 to 2010. Senator Foushee was elected to represent House District 50 in 2012, and she was then elected to the Senate in 2014, and she's now in her fourth term in that office. She also leads the fight to defend and flip seats in the North Carolina Senate as the chair of the NC Senate Democratic Caucus, and we will be asking her about that later. Senator Natalie Murdock is originally from Greensboro, graduated from UNC, and has over a decade of experience in various roles in local, regional, and state levels of government, including agribusiness and transportation planning. She served as the Deputy Director of Communications for the North Carolina Department of Justice and Traveling Press Secretary for the Deborah Ross for Senate campaign. She is very involved in the state and local Democratic parties, serving in roles from Vice Precinct Chair to third Vice President of the State African American Caucus and many things in between. And she was elected as the Durham County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor in 2018. In March 2020, she was sworn into the Senate after she won her district's primary, filling the seat previously held by Senator Floyd McKissick and becoming the first Black woman under 40 to ever serve in the North Carolina Senate. Senators, welcome. We are so grateful that you're here tonight to talk with our group.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I apologize for being a few moments late. We had a delegation meeting with the town of Carborough, so I was
Not a problem.
shifting from one to the other.
Yes.
Just in time, perfect timing.
Yes, perfect timing. So now we have questions for you all tonight about two different aspects of your jobs. The first aspect is your role as policymakers in the NCGA. The second aspect is your role as important figures in the party who are leading the charge to elect more Democrats. Now, session tonight is going to be very informal, so please feel free to discuss them together, the two of you. Just pretend we're not here and just pretend you're not on a Zoom. I guess that's possible, right? We'll save time for questions from the audience at the end. So if you have questions for the senators, please hold them. And then if they don't get answered during the session, you can submit them in the chat, and then we'll have a little Q&A session. So here goes. Here's our first topic. It's about policy in the NCGA this session. Senator Foushee, what are the big issues to look out for this year in the Senate? Is there anything that can be accomplished in a bipartisan way in this session? And are we likely to get a budget?
So I'll start with the last question first.
Okay.
Let's hope that we do get a budget. I do believe that we will pass a budget for the biennium. And I am always hopeful that it will be with bipartisan support. I do believe that the most pressing issue for this biennium will be just that, the budget. There's so many things that were not done because we did not pass a budget in the last biennium. And what has happened with the pandemic is that some things have been exacerbated, some things have been laid bare. And I think what people from this state want from us is to put hyper-partisanism aside and do the work that they sent us to do. We're going to have to make some serious policy as it relates to education. Not just, if you've been listening to the conversation with what is happening with history, you know that there's a lot of talk going on about education policy. And along with education policy, there has to be funding for construction that we have neglected for so many years. So I do believe that we're going to have the opportunity to pass an infrastructure bond that will address school needs, address university needs, and certainly address some of our needs as they relate to broadband expansion. And then, of course, there's always the conversation about access to healthcare. We know that we still need to expand Medicaid. We also know that there is no appetite for that across the aisle. So we have to find ways to get affordable access to healthcare to North Carolinians in another way. I do believe with what we've experienced over the last year, as it relates to healthcare, we will come together to do that. Again, I'm forever the optimist. And then lastly, I think that we know that redistricting will occur this year. We know that since we did not take the majority, that there will be schemes to gerrymander districts again. I mean, you know, I'm an optimist, but I'm not a fool. And so we have to prepare ourselves to be ready for the arguments for fair districts in the state. I think that the fact that we will probably delay redistricting until later in the year, likely to be in special session, it gives both sides the ability to plan a strategy to do what's best for North Carolinians. I'm hoping that there is some appetite for putting a constitutional amendment to allow us to have, excuse me, independent redistricting. But I'm also not holding my breath for that to happen. I'm just planning to do everything I can to make sure that it does. So I'll stop there and give way for my colleague to share.
Yes, I think that was a phenomenal summary. I think I'll highlight some other topics that I'm really excited about, some of which I'm working on with Senator Foushee. So as Senator Foushee mentioned, the budget is definitely the hot topic. I feel the same way. I'm hopeful that we actually will have a budget this year. We continue to file a series of mini budgets, which kind of left, some departments with not all the resources that they needed. So after attending a number of budget briefings, excited about the opportunity to kind of have a more traditional budget process. And I also came in at a time where we were bipartisan. So I also would be optimistic. I was appointed last April. And in our first COVID bill, we actually had the ability to work together. There were a number of items that made it in the budget, particularly in the Senate side. We were able to get some of those items in the budget in the midst of COVID recovery and just all of the challenges that we were facing. So I'm thankful for that opportunity to see what can happen when we actually do work together. So I'll continue to hold out for that. I know on our end, we do know that we are in the minority. So we do the work. We go to our Republican colleagues and talk with them about our needs and, see where the chips fall. All we can do is advocate for the issues that we believe in. And since it came up a little bit earlier, I will highlight some, I guess, somewhat out of the box topics that I'm excited about working on. Senator Foushee is one of the primary sponsors on the Crown Act bill. We did a press conference for that just last Friday. And being that I come from government, I have an outside inside strategy, and knowing that we didn't pick up all the seats that we wanted to pick up with the Crown Act, it will basically say that you cannot discriminate against someone because of their hair. It's an extension of their ethnicity and race, and it's akin to racial discrimination. We've seen so many women that have been subjected to that, as well as men. Most famously, a young man actually had to cut off his locks in the middle of a wrestling match, and it became national news. At the congressional level, the House has already passed the Crown Act. So a number of municipalities in Orange County are moving forward, including Orange County, the same for Durham. So the strategy there was to have local governments to pass resolutions across the state. And we still have the power of executive order and executive action. So we reached out to Governor Cooper's office, and within 3 weeks, he responded to our request. So effective February 1st, if you're a state employee, you can file an EEO complaint in the event that you feel that you were discriminated against because of your hair. I also want to highlight another bill that Senator Foushee is working on around child marriage. And I'll be honest, I honestly was not aware that in the state of North Carolina, you could get married at the age of 14 with parental consent in the event that you're pregnant. And that is, I believe, one of the lowest rates in the nation, along with Alaska. It's a bill with bipartisan support that I think will be signed into law. I also will be taking on another topic that we need to talk about, I refer to as period poverty, or the pink tax. So having a lot of conversations around the taxing of menstrual products, being that we're in the pandemic. We just are having an issue with particularly low-income families and young women having the ability to afford these products. So I'm having a lot of talks with my Republican colleagues about that topic. So I always remain hopeful and optimistic, even if it takes a few sessions to get some of these things done. We'll continue to work to move forward.
And we would be remiss if we did not share with you all, in case you have not heard, Senator Murdock and Senator Natasha Marcus and myself did file a bill to ratify the ERA in the state of North Carolina. So we're really proud about that, and we appreciate all of the support that we've gotten to push through. And we're also happy to say that every member of our caucus co-sponsored that bill.
Yes, thank you. And Lori, the state chair for that, is with us this evening. So yes, thank you all so much for your support.
Absolutely.
Well, that's terrific. And Senator Murdock, you're on the Select Committee on Prison Safety. Is there any momentum to taking bigger actions to protect prisoners from the spread of COVID?
Yes, back to bipartisanship in the very early stages of talking with my colleagues about prison safety, and it just so happens Dr. Lauren Brinstein is actually in my district. She is a top researcher in this topic and actually has been working with Senator Elizabeth Warren on this topic. And from the beginning of this pandemic, it's clear that our densely packed prisons and jails, results of decades of mass incarceration, are really the ideal condition for the transmission of COVID-19. And we now believe that 1 out of 5 people in prison have been infected. Nationally, we think we've had around 1,888 incarcerated individuals die from COVID-19, and 104 correctional facility staff members have also died. Given that Black Americans are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white Americans, they also face a higher risk of COVID-19 due to pre-existing conditions. And they really are bearing the brunt of this pandemic. And so was pleasantly surprised to be added to this committee. Senator Foushee has also done a lot of work in this area, but as a freshman, as a part of the COVID session, I did sponsor legislation to provide more protections and PPE in our prisons, working with Dr. Brinstein on a bill that will mimic federal action to also clean up our data. We're having a very difficult time getting a handle on exactly who's infected. We're also having issues of folks not being tested before they leave. So we are having some community spread. We have done some work at the local level to go ahead and release folks who've already served a considerable amount of their time. If they're elderly, if they're sick, if there's a reason for an early release, we're working to go ahead and do that. And that's worked out really well. And actually the release rates were still comparable to 2019, even though that was a policy we were more aggressive with in 2020. And in Durham, we actually worked with the state to have a pilot program and utilize an entire hotel just to have the ability to socially distance individuals that we didn't think, were a great risk. And so that program, from everything I've heard, has actually worked pretty well. But obviously any communal type of setting, prisons, dorms, nursing home, those are the areas that you really have to watch out for in COVID. So for our incarcerated individuals, community members, they were really sitting ducks. And it was just unfortunate, all the stories that we were hearing from their families at home. I would receive emails throughout my district, either if their family members were incarcerated or were staff. They really, really were fearful of their lives and did not have the protection that they needed initially. So that's something we're going to continue to keep an eye on when our COVID levels reduce and kind of dip off a little bit. Look forward to doing tours of those facilities across the state. But thank you so much for that question, because, it's our hope that they will, return to society and, become productive, citizens again. So we don't want them to be denied that opportunity because they aren't kept in a safe environment. But Senator Foushee, I know you've also done a lot of work in this space, if you want to share anything else.
I think you covered it well. We know that it's our responsibility to take care of those folk, understanding that because they are incarcerated does not mean that they shouldn't have access to health care. And those conditions are situations that we can provide relief.
Oh, and do want to mention in January 20th, that's when we received the first allocation of vaccine for prisoners as well as staff. So we are doing all we can to get them vaccinated as well.
Senator Foushee, you're on the Education Committee, and you voted against the bill to reopen the schools, which did ultimately pass. Would you please talk to us about your objections on that?
Sure, Senator Murdock did too.
Sure did.
Oh, okay.
So let's just be clear that our opposition to that bill was not because we did not or do not want schools to reopen. What we do want is for schools to be able to be reopened safely. And we say that in terms of providing safety for both the students, teachers, and staff. We don't live in a one-size-fits-all society. And certainly our LEAs are not subject to one-size-fit-all. Our concern particularly was with the fact that we could not influence or inform the decisions to move teachers up for vaccination. And we understand and appreciate the fear that many of them have for going back into an environment that is unsafe, understanding that many of them are over 60, several over 65. Many have underlying health conditions that make them vulnerable to infection. And understanding and having empathy with that, we felt that to push for schools to be reopened in a 15-day window does not give districts the ability to ensure that everybody is returning to a safe environment. And if you read that bill carefully, you'll notice that both nutrition services are mandated for that return, and transportation was mandated for that return.
Mhm.
So I had serious issues about children on school buses where they could not be socially distanced. I have concerns about lunch times where you don't have the adequate facilities to have students socially distanced in those environments, or relegating students to eat outside when conditions are such that the weather is below freezing. So there were a number of things that suggested to me that what that bill would do would force LEAs to reopen schools before they could logistically set the parameters to ensure everybody was safe.
Makes sense. And do you have anything to add, Natalie, to that?
Yeah, just think that it was very well stated, and can't add enough, because I believe Chapel Hill schools had the same concern that we did in Durham. What is the purpose of having, a local school board if the state is just going to come in and legislate the entire process and not allow you to have the local flexibility that you need to open safely? We all know we want our children to be back in school. We want to do it safely. Allow these local units, that's why they exist, to make sure that they're doing what's best for their local community. For example, in Durham, we're still having issues with, internet connection, and back to the bus route concern. It would take a lot of time to even figure out routes that would allow our students to still remain socially distant. You still need contingency plans in the events that you have, a spread. We have other variants of the disease now, of the virus. So this is a very scary time to have that conversation in just 15 days. Even when you look to our neighbors in Virginia, the governor, his goal date is the middle of March. He's being realistic to say this is a goal, and it still isn't mandated. It's basically providing a goal, allowing these local units to work together towards that goal. So I think we can do something very, very similar. And also, it was difficult for me to personally support it when we weren't included in the conversation. If you have, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, you have Wake, you have Durham. I mean, we are large districts, and we have every right to have a seat at the table when these decisions are being made. So quite frankly, I viewed it as political posturing. I didn't think that it was an authentic effort. And I could not put our kids, our students, in the middle of something like that I just didn't think was very well thought out, and did not give us the time to do it safely and effectively. But we definitely want our students to be back in school. And I'm also elated that some of the funding that we previously approved can be used for summer school. I think we definitely will have to have summer school programs like we've never had them before, because a number of our students are falling behind, and that is a concern.
That's terrific. Becca, you want to pick up this next question about redistricting?
Yes, I'm happy
And I'll,
to. Thank you for explaining your thinking on the opening schools. It's very helpful. So in terms of redistricting, Senator Foushee did bring that up somewhat, and our understanding of it was that, well, we know all the lines have to be redrawn. Our understanding of this has to be done this year, and that the data wouldn't be available till July, and that there's a plan for a special session after that. So that's part of the question, is if that's the right understanding, and also that December is the filing date for candidates. So we assume it all has to be done by then. Part of what we're wondering is, are there any partisan motives for delaying that process? And also, what are effective ways for citizens like us to weigh in during this process? And that is for either of you.
I don't know that there are partisan undertones for that. I think most of that really does have to do with the fact that the data is going to be late coming in. And so, you know, we'll have to determine what is going to be the, how shall I say this? What is the starting point, and what data sets are we looking at when we begin the process? And so I think that there may have been some partisan thought as it related to who was put on the redistricting committee. So when I got that list of senators, particularly from our caucus, I found it very interesting that we had gone through a process of choosing the committees on which we wanted to serve. And I was appointed to the redistricting committee, and I didn't choose that as a committee on which I wanted to serve. I found it very interesting that our senators who had been so involved in the process last year, and who brought the kind of understanding and experience that really made our process so much better than the process that they had in the House. They were noticeably left off that committee, particularly Senator Ben Clark, who is just great at this. And so the first thing we had to do was to meet with Leader Blue and myself, and Senator Chaudhary met with Senator Berger to talk about how that process went. And ultimately, Senator Berger and Senator Blue added Senator Clark, and I think Senator Marcus also was added to the redistricting committee because they served on it before. So my interest is that we have our best personnel representing not just the Senate Democratic Caucus, but the state of North Carolina, to ensure that that process is fair. We're not going to get fair districts if our process is not fair. And so I think that as we move forward, that if Senator Berger is true to his word, and I must give him credit for having done so in the last process, that our process will be open, that it will be such that we will get and use input from the public, that what you see will be representative of the entire chamber and not just the leadership. So I'll stop there and open up for sharing from Senator Murdock.
Yes, definitely had the same concerns. I was actually on elections and redistricting towards the end of the last biennium, and requested to remain on that committee and did not get that committee assignment. I didn't push back because I got two committees I really wanted: transportation, agriculture, and environment. But definitely picked up on that it was very strange that a lot of the folks that have been doing that work were removed from the committee. Luckily, I'm still on the Senate work group. That's our internal work group that will work on elections and redistricting, since I'm really passionate about voter suppression and our election laws, and just protecting access to the ballot. But that definitely calls us to remember to keep our eyes open. But again, remain cautiously optimistic. The Senate actually ended up with a better shake of maps than the House. And the elections show that the fact that we were able to pick up one seat is still not where it should be by a long shot. And also, I think what we are seeing nationally is we're just at a point in time from a technological perspective where you have all of the data and the tools that you need to literally know if I add this one street, that is beneficial to one side or the other. So I think we found ourselves in a difficult time where from 2010 and beyond, with all these technology upgrades, it's really, really difficult when you're in the minority to get a fair shake if you don't have something such as an independent redistricting commission, because the technology is just so advanced. And that's why that court case was spot on when they said that you could really gerrymander, with surgical precision. Whereas you and your neighbor are not in the same district and they don't have a reason for it, and they just, can walk across the street and be split in a partisan fashion. So I also am hopeful that we'll have an open and transparent process, and also think we will be in the courts a lot to ensure that the districts are as fair as they possibly can be.
I'm sure that I'm speaking for everyone on the Zoom when I say thank you very much for being such watchdogs on that and really pushing for a fair process. And I did hear you say that that there will be opportunities for public input and that you will use it. So we will be certainly looking out for those opportunities and encouraging everyone.
We're going to hold them to that, Becca, because Senator Berger said that very publicly. Yes. And I think part of what made our process different at the end of the last session was that we were able to make sure that people had a chance to come in and look at the maps while we were deliberating. It wasn't such that it was a foregone conclusion and, we put them out there, we voted on them, and then you get a chance to look at them and say, hey, that doesn't look right. That wasn't our process. And I do believe that that was precedent setting, that it would be really, really a bad situation for the other side if after having given that taste of what could happen and what should happen, to move away from that and then to present a process that is less than transparent in as much as you allow the public to see how the sausage is being made. We can use that to our advantage, and we will use it to our advantage.
Mm-hmm. That's very encouraging to hear.
Yes.
I think that's
something those records help us in court when it is very well documented from the beginning. Those public comments we have heard in the past are helpful, even if they don't get used, that they can be helpful to the court later. Is that your understanding of how those get used to? Very much so.
Okay.
The more comments, the better.
More comments, the better. Great.
Absolutely.
That is good. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk more about the electoral side now, because something that we're really interested to find out about is how North Carolina politics work. And I'm going to direct this one first to you, Senator Foushee, as the chair of the North Carolina Senate Democratic Caucus. I was wondering if you could just explain what that role entails and how it is different from Senator Dan Blue's role as the minority leader in the Senate, and also just what the comparable roles are in the House, just for us to all get a picture of how this works.
I'm not sure what my job is. No, actually, let's just say this. You cannot put my job on the same plane as Leader Blue. So basically, the job of the chair is to ensure that each member understands his or her role as it relates to expanding our caucus. That we know that as long as we are behind the 8 ball, we can't get anything done as our priorities are set. Our strategy to win, not just to expand the caucus for expansion's sake, but to be able to put into policy those ideas that we know work for North Carolinians. So for me, I'm making sure that members are holding up to their financial responsibilities so that we can hire the consultants we need to make sure that we are reaching where we need to reach, where we're getting information on messaging such that not only is our message being heard, but our message is addressing the needs that the people of North Carolina see as issues. My role is to ensure that we are making the contacts with other groups that share the same ideals in terms of making sure that we have fair districts, making sure that we are funding education adequately, making sure that we are bringing access to affordable health care. All of those things that we believe are important to North Carolinians, that's a part of how we move as a caucus. So my role is not so much as determining what our priorities are. My role is to ensure that members know what those priorities are, that members are on board with those strategies, and that members are doing their parts to ensure that we accomplish those goals. Whether those goals are financial, whether those goals are determining who's rolling out what legislation such that we're not bumping heads against each other, that we're all on board with what we have agreed those priorities to be. Senator Blue's role is to be that direct conduit between this caucus and the governor. The person who represents the entire caucus as the minority leader with the majority leader. Senator Blue is the person who determines where our members sit, the offices that they're assigned to, and for the most part, to bargain when necessary, to cajole when necessary with Senator Berger to make sure that our needs are being met and that our voices as they are representing the public are heard. I hope that is helpful.
That's very helpful and not actually what I thought. So I see it differently. Thank you for explaining. So the other thing, and I think this is related, but it's a little bit different and it's beyond the Senate caucus, but something that we as volunteers often say is we refer to the party and as if it's one thing. And it seems like there's really three different entities to that. The state party, the NCDP, which is what we're participating in when we go to our precinct meetings and our county party meetings. And that then there's the Senate caucus and the House caucus. So I'm just wondering if I'm understanding that right. And if so, if you could please explain the different functions of those three parts and how they work together.
Yeah, I think I'll pick up with the party piece, and also will add, even though I'm one of the new kids on the block, I love working with Senator Foushee. She's one of my mentors in the Senate, as well as Senator Choudhury, who's our minority leader, and so minority whip, and have talked with both of them extensively about, I think that we need to highlight when we look at the last cycle, you know, we were being safe, you know, we were following CDC guidelines, but I think we can all agree if we have the ability to physically do more organizing in a number of districts, it probably would have made a huge difference. And also don't want to skip over organizing in college areas. I think it was the talk that we had with Amy Steele that is on when they were mentioning the Wisconsin model, or maybe it was the Flip and See Zoom. When you look back in 2008, Barack Obama actually carried Jackson County, but guess what university is there? Western Carolina University, that's actually larger than UNC Asheville. Fast forward to this last cycle, I was working on Biden-Harris, and Senator Harris, now Vice President Harris, came to campus and spoke at UNC Asheville, was making phone calls. There was no organized college Democratic chapter at the University of Asheville. This is Asheville. That's insane. So when I say lack of organizing, I came in 40 days before the campaign, before Election Day, And we had huge gaps with the college organizing program because of COVID and students weren't on campus. So even though that's one piece of the pie, if you're in a district that has a handful of universities like out west, you have Brevard, you have Marcel's College. So you actually have a lot of activity out there. And if those students aren't on campus organizing, canvassing, making those calls, you don't have the foundation you need when the coordinated campaign comes in. The same for a lot of our other districts. And you all know this, we talked about it, Becca. You all knocked on 10,000 doors before you had to, calm things down for COVID. I was able to get through my entire campaign and still do a lot of physical work. So I did want to kind of preface all of that with, when we say we want more field, we did not have the ability to do that last cycle. We will be doing that for 2022. Definitely know the Senate caucus is supportive of that. Have heard rumors, but still need to confirm that the state Democratic Party does get that. I'm comfortable saying that. I am an SEC member. I am publicly actually supporting previous House member Bobby Richardson to serve as chair. I think it's long past time that we have a Black woman to serve as chair. I also think that when you see people of color voting at such high levels and consistently, 8 to 9 out of 10 Black voters are going to vote Democrat. It's time for us, for one, to truly have leadership opportunities in the party. Luckily, I've benefited from that in Durham County. So I think that's a big part of it. We'll know where to go. I joined Biden-Harris 40 days before the election. Within 1 week, I was able to have a contact list of hundreds of people. And I walked in without that. I just knew to make some phone calls from Wilmington to Asheville. I knew I could figure it out. And that's why I joined. So you have to also have people that know North Carolina, that have those relationships. And we hear people loud and clear, more local organizers. I think the party is open to a regional model where if you look at the state and maybe break it into 5, 7, 8, 10 different regions and think regionally, and kind of have a key organizer for that region, figure out a way to pay for it. We know that worked well in Wisconsin. I think they had 137 organizers paid on the ground before the coordinated campaign showed up. But it takes a minimum of $1 million annually to raise to be able to pay for a program like that. So it's also talking with your donors to say, we want these funds, but we want field. And I can tell you, I'm already hopping on the phones for the Senate caucus. And I'm hearing that loud and clearly from the donors. They're saying, what are you all doing to be like Georgia? What are we doing in the field? And I thank them for that. And it's unfortunate that we live in that system. The donors can actually dictate where the money goes because we need their money. And so the fact that the donors have seen Georgia with a very diverse, field forward program, that they had success back to back. And I also want to highlight a comment that I agree with in the chat. Consultants are only as good as the advice that you give them. You can push back. In Georgia, with those 2 Senate campaigns, because I know a number of people that packed up and moved, God bless them. They left North Carolina, Biden-Harris, packed up, moved to Georgia. And when those consultants told them to keep taking all their money and put it on TV, they said absolutely not. And they put it in field and they won. So you still have to give feedback to those consultants. I worked on the Deborah Ross for Senate campaign. We raised more money than Richard Burr. Communications is my wheelhouse. When they sent me that communications plan from DC, and I did not think that minority media buy was adequate, I sent it back. I said, nope, I need to see Latinx media. I need to see African-American media. I need to see these radio buys. We need to have ads in these papers. You have to provide that feedback to the consultants. You can't just, check the box. So when we say consultants, yes, you can, do a better job of making sure you have consultants that, are tried and tested and other areas and regions that are like yours, but it definitely is a two-way street where you can always push back on any recommendation that a consultant provides you. And they're your client, we're their client, they have to answer to us.
That's right.
Did you want to add anything else to that, Senator Foushee?
No, she's absolutely correct. And we and press our consultants, and this is my 5th term, and when they weren't doing what we needed them to do, we got rid of them. And I think that we could have done better. We wish we had done better in this last election, but we did better than many gave us the credit for, or even thought or fathomed that we could do. I think that going into the election before people saw our ground game, nobody believed that we would even keep the number that we had. You know, we picked up 6 seats before and we picked up 1 seat this time. You know, we're on a different trajectory. When I first came, we started out with 17, we went down to 16, and then we went down to 15 before we moved to 21.
Goodness. Yeah, because to continue to provide that national perspective with sharing with Becca and Susan, yes, there are things we could have done differently, but we are one of only 6 chambers in the nation that were under Republican control that picked up a seat.
Exactly.
So back to our earlier discussion of gerrymandering nationally, you know, President Obama won, we celebrated, we kicked our feet up, we got our butts kicked in 2010 and got stuck with very difficult maps. And if anything, I think it really shows the power of gerrymandering, which is why we really have to fight that. But again, when we did break the supermajority, we did that with maps that we did not create. So again, we'll continue to work and pound the pavement. Hope 2022 looks very different, but do also want to add, we do still have to go back to the basics. Definitely towards the end of last year, did encounter counties that didn't locally have the capacity to cut turf, you know, have lists, really kind of dig into that data. So I definitely think at the state level, we still have to constantly provide that technical assistance to all counties, still let them run their program. But when we opened up the door and said, hey, you know, do you all need help with lists? We were actually overwhelmed with all the requests we received. So from Randolph County to Onslow County, we were cutting turf, my little coalitions team on the coordinated campaign. So I think that as long as they know that they're in charge and just allow them to ask for what they need and give our local parties the tools they need to be successful. And I think we'll have a very different outcome in 2022 if we do that.
Thank you very much for working for that. And I'll just tack on another question, which is, you know, a lot of people say, who's our Stacey Abrams in North Carolina? And you were quoted in the News and Observer, Senator Murdock, saying every community has a Stacey Abrams. Every community has a woman of color doing the work. Just wanted to give you an opportunity to say a little bit more about that and any lessons you think we could learn from Georgia.
Absolutely. I want to highlight in Georgia, for one, for some folks on social media that kind of didn't get exactly where I was going with that, Stacey Abrams is the queen. No one is denying that. No one is denying that. But what I do want to say, since we have 100 people on, and I have some phenomenal women here, we have Senator Foushee, we have Amy Steele on the line. We also cannot fall into this mode of we just need kind of this one Black superwoman that's going to come in and save our state. That's just not going to happen. So the reason that I made that comment was to empower local communities to know you have this person in your community. Amy still calls them Big Mama, right? Every county has a Big Mama. You call her, she has the call list. I've literally, I mean, from Bladen County to Anson County, I know for a fact we have, they're predominantly women, Black women over 60. And they go old school. They just take the voter rolls, they split the list up, they know who's making calls. We call them the callers and the haulers. They're doing it. They just may not have Boat Builder, or they don't have access to the consultants to say, these are the partnerships that you should have. So the point of that comment was in saying, you'll continue to lose if you focus on one individual to help your state to get it together. Can we receive her advice? Absolutely. I've actually been through training that's designed by her team. Did that some years ago. But I will add, they were open to coming to North Carolina about 2 years ago. I do have to throw that in there. But at any rate, their training is phenomenal. And it's a lot of what we're doing. It's connecting policy to advocacy to action. So I'll use the Crown Act as a quick example. You can campaign even if you don't have a specific person that you are campaigning for. You can still galvanize around an issue. And, you know, using the Crown Act as an example, people from Asheville to Watauga County are calling us about, oh my gosh, what are you doing? How can we get involved? when you organize people and get those lists and realize who is really doing this work in all 100 counties, then when it's time to campaign, you already have your list. You already have your asset map. You know who the power players are. You know who's going to get involved to help you achieve those goals. So we can definitely do that here, but still shout out to Amy Steele, who is doing the hard work. I think what we are missing in North Carolina is a Black-led organization that focuses on voter registration. I think that when we look at the maps and do the analysis, we're doing it in the Senate and the House caucus, I do think there are districts where we'll say, what would happen if we just got 3,000 more people registered to vote and actually got them to show up? That's the difference of what Georgia did. Stacey Abrams had a 10-year plan and knew she very quietly, I don't want to misquote the number, but let's say it was 200,000. She knew what that number was 10 years before she ran for governor. So we have to figure out what is our number, get those people registered, but also to redefine what GOTV looks like. Because I'll be honest, what I ran into with the presidential campaign is we were able to identify these voters and work on these partnerships, but then we didn't have the resources to directly provide to a church to do souls to the polls, to provide them with a gas card, to provide them with additional funding to clean their van. So we still have an issue of also directing resources to the groups that are actually going to get the work done. But in summary, it's really just empowering local leadership. And I think the work that Amy Steele is doing with having a C3 and a C4 to pull all this together, to lean into voter registration, literally going to every corner of the universe. We also have to target our voters differently. Far too often we go to, the tried and true reliable voters that turn out every election. If you reach out to that voter that you haven't seen since 2008, you may be pleasantly surprised. And so far too often, even with precinct organizing, we focus on the voters that show up all the time. And you have to say, I want you to run another report because on this side of town, that no one's talking to them at all. And then when you show up to them, you'll be pleasantly surprised that they'll just be happy that you knocked on their door.
Mm.
Thank you for all of that. And that touches on a lot of things that we certainly hope to pursue in the next event in our series that many of you came to, because we are doing a series with Flip NC called Building a Grassroots Strategy to Elect Democrats in North Carolina. And we talked about how Wisconsin did it last time, which was really interesting. And so our How Georgia Did It event will be coming up, and we will announce that date as soon as we have it. But we hope to follow through on a lot of what you just brought up. Thank you so much for that. Before we pass it over to the Q&A, because there are many questions in there, I'm afraid we won't get to all of them, but Patience will do her best. Is there anything else you just wanted to have a chance to say before we pass it over to audience Q&A? You're ready.
Let's hear your questions.
All right. Patience is one of our chapter leaders, and she is in charge of the chat questions with Bonnie. And Patience, we hand it over to you.
Okay, we're going to go back to some of the issues that you covered earlier as well. What progress in dealing with the climate crisis can you see happening this year?
You did ask that on the right day. We actually are still filling out, again, our colleagues, since we are in the minority, we're very upfront about that, checking the temperature of our colleagues. We did have a meeting today of kind of our informal environmental caucus that we're working on in the Senate. And so we are looking at some legislation. So definitely, optimistic. I think we definitely will file a number of bills that will address climate change, environmental issues in general, and how they overlap with agriculture. Energy and environment is included with the Ag Committee. So I definitely think our farmers have a role to play in that, and how they're responsible when it comes to reducing our emissions. So cautiously optimistic. I will shout out House Chuck McGrady. He was kind of that key environmental advocate that we could work with on the other side, since he was a previous chair of the Sierra Club. But we will be moving forward with some bills coming up pretty soon.
Okay. Is there support in the General Assembly to appropriate the money that's needed to support the necessary measures to open schools safely? In other words, PPE and ventilation systems and so forth.
I think there is, and I think that if indeed we support the governor's plan, not just for how we appropriate the federal dollars that we have, but using some of those unreserved funds. His proposal uses about 700 million of unreserved funds that we can use for those purposes. And so I think if our colleagues are really serious about returning students to school safely, that they will support many of these proposed funding mechanisms that the governor has proposed. We haven't heard any opposition to it yet. Let's put it that way.
But I will add an amendment that didn't move forward. Shout out to Senator Wiley Nickel, hit the nail on the head. More psychologists, more school nurses, more contact tracers. So providing the physical resources we need would also be really, really helpful.
And do prisoners and staff have enough medical grade personal protective equipment? Is that something, could the state allocate, you know, N95 and other similar masks to everyone?
I think we're definitely doing better. I think, as you can see, even just when it comes to what's available in the store, we just had a huge shortage just from a lack of federal coordination when it came to PPE. So we are doing much better than we were at the height of the pandemic, as far as having adequate PPE in our prisons, and even cleaning supplies.
How can we help to generate support for the constitutional amendment regarding independent redistricting that Senator Foushee mentioned and advocates?
I think what we've been doing heretofore, we just have to keep it up. We have to keep that message out there, particularly as we start talking about what that process is going to look like. A lot of people have been on us about having independent redistricting, but I think that they don't realize that currently our Constitution gives that responsibility to the legislature, and that the only way we can change that is to change the Constitution, or to amend the Constitution such that that responsibility can go elsewhere. So we need that support for having that done. And the more we talk about it, the more we can get support from Republicans, and not just Republicans in the legislature. You know, it should be on all of us to want fair elections, to want fair districts. And after what we've seen from January 6th, it's hard for me to believe that everybody and anybody who has the right to vote, and anybody who really believes in democracy, would not want us to be able to take that process out of the hands of people who will work for their own interests rather than the people whom they serve, to push that forward. So I would just say that we need to keep singing that song, that we need to ensure that the voters choose their legislators instead of the legislators choosing their voters.
And this is a question that was sent in to us prior to the meeting. What are the most and least effective ways of expressing our opinions to North Carolina General Assembly members and influencing state policy, especially if we live in your district or another blue district or another blue area?
Yes, I can definitely speak for. I think when I was first getting to know Senator Foushee, I was blown away with how responsive she was. I'll catch up to her one of these days, but I can tell you the vast majority, particularly on our side, we read all of our emails, we read all of our letters, we take them very seriously. But I think with groups like Neighbors on Call or other statewide groups that you are a part of, Flippancy has done a little bit of this too. You really do need to think of who you know in other parts of the state. This year, we really wanted to flip New Hanover County, even though we lost my colleague, Harper Peterson. We did do a better job in New Hanover overall. They went for Biden. So I have a lot of family members in Wilmington that I have been working on for about 4 years of saying, you all have got to step up to the plate. So they've had some changes, even with kind of their local city council makeup being more diverse. So if you know folks, in Union, in Gaston, actually my favorite story of that, a project I worked on with Senator Kathy Harrington, it just so happened one of her constituents reached out to her about the same issue, and we actually were able to get movement on that item and get it in the budget last year. So particularly when it comes to the leadership in the House or the Senate, you need to have constituents in those districts reaching out and to find out what happened in my situation, constituents that actually have those relationships, and you may have some commonality. But if they get but if Henderson County gets a tons of emails from Durham, it doesn't have the same impact.
Okay, and then I guess my last question here is that a couple of people have asked is, what do you need from grassroots groups like us, like Neighbors on Call?
I think you keep us going, honestly. I think just keep doing what you're doing, and hats off to you. Very open and transparent, had great conversations with your directors. You're stepping up and honestly doing what our, infrastructure currently is not doing. You're filling in gaps and just stepped in and did it. I think we'll figure out a way to formalize that with the party. But I think having the ability to have folks to go to other counties. Senator Foushee has also done a lot of work with county to county that Durham County is also a part of. So yes, you need locally led opportunities, but having the ability to have volunteers to just drive an hour or so. I know I spent some time in Alamance County knocking on doors, would like to think that was helpful, towards, having our first Latinx representative. So I think when it comes to grassroots, just continuing to show up when we, have public hearings around things such as gerrymandering, we need you to physically be there. And studies still show there's nothing more powerful than someone physically coming to your door. So we can literally never have enough people that are willing to come out of their comfort zone, physically knock on doors and physically talk to people.
Not a lot to add to that, but I will go back to a point that Senator Murdock made earlier. We talk a lot about what Stacey Abrams did, and we're all grateful for that. But to the point she made, the alternative of thinking that if we don't have a Stacey Abrams, we can't win, makes no sense.
Yes.
And so we may not be named Stacey Abrams, we may not look like Stacey Abrams, we may not act like Stacey Abrams, but collectively, all of us doing our parts, all of us sharing what we know, being willing to go that extra mile, stepping out of our comfort zone and having a plan makes us all Stacey Abrams-like.
Yes.
And not light, but Stacey Abrams-like, L-I-K-E. So I would say that's what we keep doing. That's what got us to where we are, and that's what's going to take us higher.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just so grateful for the work. I remember the first time you guys showed up.
Yeah.
Shortly after you organized, I remember the first time you showed up in the gallery.
Yeah.
And look where you are now. All of you are Stacey Abrams-like.
Wow.
And that's also the power of this year. Look at what we did after 2016. We figured it out, so I'm looking forward to 2022, and it's going to be fueled by groups like Neighbors on Call.
Well, thank you to both of you for those really encouraging, uplifting words. And we are certainly, finding what our best role, most effective role is for 2022, but we promise we will be there and we are ready to do the hard work. And there are so many positive comments. I'm sure you're seeing them in the chat, but everyone is so grateful for the two of you, for all that you do. Just one example, Isabel read, but I think she wrote, but she speaks for all of us. These two incredible senators represent the best of us. Thank you. But so many comments like that. We just are so grateful. We could fill up many more nights asking you questions. So we hope that you will come back again to talk to Neighbors on Call.
Absolutely. And great turnout. Great work.
Thank you.
We'll share the recording with all those people who are wishing they could be here too.
I know it.
To our neighbors in the Zoom, thank you also for being here. And coming up on Saturday, we hope you'll join us at the virtual HK on J Moral March on Raleigh to show solidarity with progressives across the state. Like us, you may have fond memories of the past years when we were there in person. We were freezing. At least this year will be warm in our homes, but not nearly as fun. HK&J stands for Historic Thousands on Jones Street, and this year it'll be a Facebook Live event on the NCAACP page, and I'll put that link in the chat, but you can certainly, and we'll share it in our follow-up email tomorrow. And then in March, please plan to join your Democratic Party precinct organizing meeting. The precincts are the crucial building blocks of the party. That is how we show up to say that we're in. It's how we plug into the party. And we will have details about that in an upcoming Monday email, but you can also check your county party website because those dates vary by county. And finally, please stay tuned for the second event in our series, the Building a Grassroots Strategy to Elect Democrats, How Georgia Did It. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for being here. And if you would like to hang out with us for our after party, please do.